The Russian embassy has given a warning to the UK, to London, saying that they are threatening them with consequences because of the actions that they are taking to support Ukraine against Russia.
Yes, so this is the first time Russia directly threatens an EU country over the drones that have been flying into Russia. So this is sort of a big deal, unfortunately. Like and subscribe.
This is one of the more direct threats that we've seen in a long time from Russia, not just something from the foreign ministry specifically, but from the UK, from the Russian embassy in London, issuing a very explicit and direct warning. This was from the official site of the Russian Federation to the United Kingdom. And they said, the headline there, you can see, embassy comment on reports of Ukrainian forces using British UAVs to strike Russia. The United Kingdom is acting as an accomplice and co-perpetrator of the bloody crimes and terrorist attacks committed by Ukrainian neo-Nazis seeking to contain Russia and inflict maximum damage on it by proxy. London's actions will inevitably carry consequences for which it will have to answer. The deeper its involvement in the conflict and the greater its support for Kiev terrorist machinery, the higher price it will pay. The site did not talk anymore specifically about what those threats are, what it was, or what it may be coming, but it certainly is causing lots of consternation, and actually not even consternation so much as it is anger in London, not fear, not backing down, but anger. But the BBC, this is reported by Al Jazeera, the BBC actually contacted a former Russian deputy foreign minister who told the BBC earlier today that these consequences could include the possibility of attacks, direct attacks on the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I've warned earlier this year that it was very possible that Russia would strike a NATO member before the end of the year. This just reinforces that we're heading that direction. I wouldn't be surprised if one of the drone factories making the drones that are hitting and killing Russian civilians, if that gets taken out by an Oreshnik at some point.
He said that many military experts advising the Kremlin are convinced that NATO would not respond forcefully if Russia were to hit the UK. Trump will not allow NATO to answer, he said. Well, apparently, Andy Burnham, the new prime minister for UK, did not get that memo because he was pretty swift in his response. He said the UK support is 100%. UK Prime Minister Andy Burnham said that London will continue to support Ukraine 100%.
Why? Why is UK and all these EU countries sending billions and billions and billions to Ukraine for a war that Ukraine is destined to lose? It makes no sense.
After Moscow warned of consequences following the confirmation that British-made drones were used in recent Ukrainian strikes in Russia.
It makes no sense from the perspective of those countries. It makes sense to me in that, yes, this is U.S. deep state's attempt to take out Russia, and EU puppet leaders are being good little puppets and helping to support Ukraine to weaken Russia.
Remember, this is the BBC here. This is not something from Russia. It's not something from their foreign ministry. And it is confirming that British-made drones, not even just components, were used in this recent Ukrainian strike against Russia. We are not fair weather friends, Andy Burnham said. We will be there in Ukraine's hour of need, and that won't change, he said. So the question is going to be, what now? Are we entering into a new territory? Are there some new possibilities here? Could the war finally see that lateral escalation and advancement and spilling beyond the borders of Ukraine?
If it does happen, it won't be like this week or next week. It'll probably be in a month because Russia tends to move slow on these things. But it moves slowly but surely. And if it's making these warning, it means we're heading there. And although it might be in a month, unless something changes on the European side, there will be fireworks at some point.
That we've long been warning about as a possibility. I don't think that you can just dismiss this anymore and just say this is just rhetoric. And look, we've got to be looking at kind of how we got here. This war started.
We won't be bullied. We reserve the right as UK to make drones, then launch them deep into Russia and kill your civilians, and without you doing anything back against us. That's what we, the UK, want. That is us being brave and courageous. It is us hitting you, and you're not allowed to hit back. Nah, 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 nah. Yeah, that is the UK for you.
In 2022 with the West, and especially Joe Biden at the time, very keenly aware of the risk of the escalation, and that this could mean, as President Biden often said, in World War III. You may remember the first time the idea of F-16s came up.
That right there is a Wildberry warehouse hit by a UK drone. Yeah. Yeah, that's what the UK wants. It wants to just be able to, like, blow up the equivalent of Amazon warehouses in Russia, and Russia doesn't do anything back against the UK. That's because they have this cheat thing to attack Russia without getting hit back. It's called a launching platform, and the name of that launching platform is Ukraine. And as long as they shoot from that launching platform, Russia isn't allowed to hit UK. You could just make the drones, use U.S. intelligence to guide it into a Wildberry warehouse, and because it's launched from this magical launching platform called Ukraine, Russia isn't allowed to strike UK back. That is what UK claims.
Biden shot that down. He said no, because that would mean World War III. And so there was a lot of concern about giving too much offensive weapons, even early in the conflict, by the West, by Europe and the United States. Like, they wanted to kind of hurt Russia. They wanted to help Ukraine, but not too much, because they didn't want to risk any kind of bleed over escalation that might strike any of them, especially the eastern flank of NATO.
It's desperation that's driving them to make these provocations to basically directly attack Russia. It's because Ukraine's losing. Project Ukraine, the attempt to take out Russia, has failed.
But those fears began to dissipate. And over time, they would go just a little further. And then they would say a little bit more ammunition, a little bit more kinds of weapon systems.
They'd seize a couple of Russian ships at sea. They'd use NATO airspace to fly drones through it to attack St. Petersburg. Just escalation after escalation after escalation. They'd send some Storm Shadow missiles over. Escalation, escalation.
And each time, oftentimes Russia would say, this is a bad thing. You're taking risk. Never exactly threatened, if you do that, we're going to attack. At least not in the early days. They warned of potential consequences, but they left it vague. The West listened to what they said, took action to see what the reaction would be, stood back and watched. Nothing happened. So then the next time they would go a little bit further, and they would have even more involvement. And
because Putin never pushed back, never enforces red lines, a lot of Russian civilians have died. Like the workers in those warehouses that get blown up. Some Russians lying on the beach when a drone dives into them.
It would give even more weapon systems, more capabilities, more technology, more training, more intelligence. And so that has continued on. And in its current phase, since Ukraine and Zelensky started their 40-day campaign in June, designed to bring Russia to the negotiating table.
To give you an idea how good that campaign has gone to bring Russia to its knees. Right now, I've been using this website. It's Ukrainian-run website. It used to be pretty good it was delayed in recognizing Russian advances, but it would recognize them. But now Ukraine has announced that it's no longer going to be updating this map. That means no matter how many cities that Russia captures, this map's just not going to be updated. Like that, they can pretend the front line is stable in Ukraine, just because they won't update the map anymore. The point is, if they're doing that, if they're not updating the map anymore because Ukraine is losing ground so quickly, that tells you how well the war in Ukraine's going.
Terms that the Ukraine would find tolerable, that included a lot more help from probably the United States specifically, because a lot of these targets that were hit deep inside of Russia had pinpoint accuracy, and that almost certainly means that they had technology from the West and targeting data from the West as well, because it's hard to get that kind of granularity just from their own domestic capabilities. So it was becoming more and more evident that the West was getting more and more involved. And now then we've had here this spate of attacks continuing on now. Overnight there were, I believe it was in a 24-hour period, about 2,000 drones of various types that were launched by Ukraine into Russia. Nearly all of them were shot down, nearly, but not all. Some found their targets. And some in recent days have been hitting really important stuff like refinement capacity. That, by the way, is having a negative impact.
It has a negative impact on Russia and the world, by the way, because that's why diesel prices are exploding. Russia is normally one of the biggest exporters of diesel, and they've forbidden the export of diesel till September 1st for now. I think that might be extended. We'll have to see. And that's one reason the rest of the world is a little bit short on diesel, and diesel prices are exploding. That, and of course, the closure of Strait of Hormuz.
Impact on us and on the global marketplace. We showed you earlier today, I actually still have that up there. We have this issue with the diesel crack rates that's a barrel equivalent is $102, which I think is an all-time high. I don't think just in this war. Not sure it's ever been higher than that. And that is as a result is a combination of what's going on in the Middle East with the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandab and the refinement capacity of diesel specifically.
You should search and find out what the Secretary of the Treasury is saying. If they have any boring statements or disclosures that are never covered by the media. I doubt it. He's the one manipulating the market. He's going to be he knows that everyone's watching him. He's not going to be making statements. That would be news. I think if the Secretary of the Treasury said something like we are manipulating the markets, that'd be all over the Wall Street Journal. He's too important for loose comments to not get picked up and amplified.
By Ukraine against Russia. So Russia used to export a lot of...
Besides, I read Zero Hedge. It would be on Zero Hedge if you did anything like that.
Of diesel and a lot of jet fuel. But because of the strikes on these refinements, which are some of the refining capacities that make those two products, now Russia is having to conserve what it has. It's not putting it out into the global market. It's using it itself. And even then, it's having to constrain how it uses. But the impact on Russia is negligible. It's annoying. It may cause them to tighten their belts and to make some changes, move things around internally. But the impact on the global marketplace is a little more important because we're already constrained in the Middle East. And now there's additional constraints because of these actions by Ukraine, supported by the West, that actually comes around to harm the West again. So it's just another one of those examples that we seem to be cutting off our nose to spite our face with no idea where this is even going. And where is it going? Because a lot of these targets that have been hit in Russia here recently have been specifically against targets that are less defended, things that have big emotional value. They have big,
or just apartment buildings.
Big video value, and that helps in the war of public relations, both support in the West to show, hey, we're doing something. And of course, we've seen the result of that, that you've had any number of generals come on in the last couple of months, especially, and say the tide has turned. We now put Russia on the back foot. We're now moving in a direction that...
And yet they've announced that they're no longer to be updating their maps. They were moving forward, so I guarantee you they'd be updating the maps.
They will now feel the pain of war so much so that pretty soon, as long as we keep this up, Putin is going to feel enough domestic political pressure that he's going to now have to come hat in hand to the negotiating table on terms that we can live with. Well, listen, let me just tell you, first of all, that's nearly impossible to happen. If anything, it's going to cause the right, the war hawks in Russia, and they have their own version of it, to give them more credibility and more influence to strike harder, deeper, and more often into the Ukraine side. That's happening so far because the Russian side has stepped that up, and they've hit a lot of additional targets already that the Ukraine side has been hurt, and they've stepped up a lot of these. And now of course, there's effectively no air defense against any ballistic missiles, so Russia can continue.
Yeah, Ukraine has no air defenses. Their central command for air defenses was taken out, I think, towards the beginning of July, and since then, they haven't been shooting down jack shit.
To hit whatever it aims at. There's nothing that they can do to stop that. But the idea that these strikes are going to cause Russia to not be able to prosecute the war and then to have to come to the table to change their terms is just nonsensical, because it's not going to. You can strike their version of Amazon all day long. But I believe this video here, this is of the front lines for some of the Russian glide bombs that continue to have their effect. So all these strikes have nothing whatsoever to do with the attacks on the front line by the Russian forces against the Ukraine side. All it does is make great video that they can show that they're taking it to the Russians or whatever. But that's not changing anything. But here's the additional underlying problem. is that it gives the West this sense of invulnerability. That like,
Well, that's just a problem with the media. That's Western media portraying losing as winning, black as white, day as night. Yes, like Asmongold just watched his latest Ukraine video. It was from a month ago, is when they were bombing Moscow, and he's like, "Oh my God, Russia's getting crushed," and it's very effective on people like Asmongold.
I know that's not going to cause anything. It's like hitting Amazon in the United States, and that's going to piss off a lot of people. It's going to make people angry. It's not going to have anything to do with the war. This claim that Russia uses wildberries as a place to distribute military stuff, I don't know. There could be some dual use things. There could be some truth to it. It's inconsequential because they have a military distribution system that is not being touched, because that actually has more defensive capabilities. And of course, the country is so wide and spread out that you're not going to be able to affect. I actually still have that here. When you see a country that's spread out this big,
Oh,
and
good.
Russia,
I was about to show it. Yeah, all drone strikes have been in this area of Russia. But to be fair, 90% of the population of Russia is in this part of Russia too. That said, there is a lot of important infrastructure over here too, and that's not getting attacked.
can spread out a lot of its manufacturing capabilities all over the place. You're just not going to be able to get to it. So instead, they're going towards Moscow, places that they can reach, in places where there's cameras, so that people can record all these things and then make our side think, yeah, well, let's keep supporting the war. Here's the problem, and it's a big one. Now then, with this statement by the Russian embassy, that again, this is again former official Russian embassy in the United Kingdom, and they're saying that there are consequences, and the more you're involved, the greater the consequences. So it's left to the interpretation of what that may mean. But if we continue to believe there is no upward end, there is no red line in Russia, there is literally.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that Russia will not respond to all these drones attacks. They know exactly who's responsible, and that's not Ukraine. Ukraine's just a launching platform. All these NATO countries that think that they can just hit critical infrastructure in Russia, kill Russian civilians with impunity, thanks to the magical launching platform of Ukraine. Yeah, no, Russia will be holding grudges over that, and probably strike one of them at some point. But even the ones it doesn't strike, this is going to impact international relations going forwards, decades.
Literally nothing we can do, because we keep thinking Article 5, man, 32 against 1. Russia will never do that. That is not a safe assumption. The one thing this deputy foreign minister, he is right here, and that there are many ex-military advisors. We see a lot of them on some Russian media, on Telegram, and some other places, that are convinced that NATO would not respond. Now, that could be dead wrong. That could be a catastrophic miscalculation on the Russian side, thinking that the United States won't actually get involved, and that they could strike even the UK or Germany or France, and then there wouldn't be a response. That might not be a safe assumption, but it doesn't matter whether we think it is or not. If they think that it's a safe assumption, they may act on it, just like what the West is doing.
I will add that if Trump really does use a nuke against Iran, Russia hitting UK and other these drone factories becomes much, much more likely. It's an escalation. The rules have changed. Now, the threat of nuclear war has been unleashed despite Russia's restraint. So it's going to feel like, yeah, what were we restrained for anyway?
And especially the UK, and assuming that Russia never will do anything. So you have two sides assuming the other side wouldn't do anything. One side is definitely acting on it, and we dare not get into a situation where the other side starts acting on it, because they think, like you do, that, oh, well, they wouldn't do that, because that could be nuclear war. So they're not stupid. They won't do it. And yet that's exactly what we're doing on our side by continuing to support this stuff with direct intervention on the ground.
I mean, if we cared at all about preventing nuclear war, then the UK would not be manufacturing drones, sending them to Ukraine, and then shooting them deep into Russia to kill Russian civilians. It would not be doing that to a nuclear power like Russia, if the UK cared about preventing nuclear war.
Now, this is a dangerous situation. I know everybody in the West wants to look tough. And I know everybody wants to say, yeah, well, we're not going to back down from nobody. And if you threaten us, oh, yeah, well, we'll double down on you, because That's just how we are these days. We've gotten used to nobody having threat domination over us. We could keep on ratcheting it up. We could go up the escalation ladder and everybody else will back down. And that's just kind of in our DNA now, ever since the Cold War. And everything since the Cold War is only
No, it's because of the media. Media portrays the United States military as invincible, portrays NATO as the strongest military alliance in the world has ever seen. And a lot of people believe the propaganda. And if you believe the propaganda and you think NATO is really this undefeatable military alliance, then how dare Russia threaten NATO? If you know the reality you get from people like Daniel Davis, you know that Europe is a paper tiger. Without the United States, Europe gets crushed by Russia. And the United States is pretty distracted at the moment and is weaker than it's ever been. So even with the United States, I still think Europe gets crushed now. I mean, after the latest 2-week bombing campaign by Trump, depleting ammunitions even further, yeah, the United States has never been weaker.
reinforce that. But one of these days, we may discover that those dynamics have changed, that the conditions have changed, that the other side may calculate, I see your missiles. I see you have no air defense. I see you guys are weak-willed, big mouths, but little muscles. I don't think you would do it. And they may finally be willing to test it. Just like it took a while for our side to test the Russian lines. And every time they kept pushing them.
Iran's position has hardened. Russia's position is hardening. I think that's a big part in response to the obvious weakness of the U.S. military that's on display for the entire world.
They go a little bit further until now, then there's just nearly open direct engagement with literal British technology, their tech targeting. I mean, they're doing everything except pulling the trigger. That the Russian side may do the same thing just a little bit later to the game. And once that threshold is crossed, friends, it's a whole new world we're going to be looking at then. We're going to keep a close eye on this for you and keep on watching it. But right now, here in just about 5 minutes from now, we have Professor Saeed Mohammed Marandi, who's going to answer a lot of questions that we've been asking, being raised because of some of the things we've seen coming out of official Iranian public statements about where this war is going, and is Iran about to start one? We'll come and see you there in about 5 minutes on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.
All right. Well, that was a good video, and yeah, the events are moving in the direction I thought they would, unfortunately, where Russia is getting ready to strike a NATO country, and it's looking like it might be the UK. And I say that because UK is the country that Russia specifically warned. And this is a necessary step before Russia striking a EU country. A last direct warning to the country that's about to be struck. And if they don't heed that warning, well, there are Oreshniks that nothing can stop. This will be on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Come watch on Kick or Twitch, and I'll see you next video. Bye.